Welcome back to the Legal Weekly Wine, where we discuss the hottest legal topics weekly in the U.S. It is Friday for happy hour. We are posting by 4 p.m. on Friday, every Friday. I'm Virginia Tehrani.
And I'm Chelsey Rogers.
And we are with Tehrani Law, LLC, because you never need a lawyer.
Till you do.
All right. So we are also hosted by the Law Unscripted. So that's the podcasting company that is supporting us, putting us out. Check out the Law Unscripted, the actual podcast itself, on Tuesdays through our companies, where we discuss everything about the law you didn't know.
Didn't understand.
And no one ever told you. So those are the two shows. But today, tell us what we're talking about.
So today we are diving into Gabby Petito. And I know that name is going to sound familiar to a lot of people, not the true crime side of things. Since her unfortunate death and her murderer's suicide, there have been a lot of lawsuits filed. And so we're going to go one by one and go through those today and sort of what they mean. And with your expertise, get some reads on what you think the likely outcomes of some of these will be.
Okay, so it's not expertise. I am not an expert, but I am an attorney who has opinions.
Yes.
As to, based on experience, what may or may not be happening. I am not an attorney in Florida or Utah. I'm an attorney in Maryland, D.C., and Virginia. But I do understand at least the basic premise of the legal maneuvering and arguments that are happening. And I will tell you, it is absolutely brilliant what's happening right now. I am enthralled.
Yes.
For those of you who don't know this is really interesting stuff in the legal world that's happening right now. It's a lot of the type of law that I do. Civil personal injury lawsuits. Mm-hmm. And this is hitting everything that I do on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. So to me, I'm just enraptured. I'm like, oh my God, this is, there are a lot of true crime podcasts out there. There are a lot of people who deal in true crime, and this is a true crime issue.
Absolutely.
But the legal stuff is fascinating.
Yes, it's very complicated too. You would think, maybe one lawsuit, one and done, but they are suing everybody. My opinion, rightfully so. And it's very strategic. It's very strategic in sort of the choices they're making, but we can sort of dive into that later.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really excited to do that. And you've read up a lot on the content, and I know you were able to pull a lot of the legal filings you were able to find.
Law school taught me how to do research. I came prepared today.
It's good. Yeah. We're hoping to actually use the legal language and seem like we know what we're doing.
Something like that.
We also, because we are the weekly wine, we have another wine, and I'm so delighted that Chelsey has brought her favorite wine.
I finally remembered. I'm getting my life together over here, but this is my favorite wine. Anyone who knows me, you will find a bottle of this in my fridge pretty much always, but this is Riunite Lambrusco, and it is a sparkling red. Now, I do have to be honest, Virginia, I'm kind of in that college student phase. This is a cheap bottle of wine.
Last week before the new year, we had the Dark Horse, which was a fairly cheap bottle, but a delicious one. I don't care what it costs as long as it's a good bottle of wine.
It is my favorite. I've done all the fancy wine tastings, and I went to Israel and did wine tastings there and in Spain, and this is still my favorite bottle. Tried and true. I don't know if I'll ever find something to replace it, so I hope you like it. It's very sweet, but I like it. So
I like sweet wines. Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers.
And did a big gulp.
As usual, it's Chelsey's thing. She gulps.
At this point.
We're just used to it. If you hear it, it's Chelsey.
Yes, it is.
Oh, that's really good.
See, I told you.
I love sweet wines. I love dessert type wines. And it's almost like a Moscato.
Very similar.
In taste.
But, right? And see, it's like not too sweet where you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's not overwhelmingly sweet. It's not like I'm chewing it. But it goes down very easily. And that's a big bottle of wine, so we're going to see how much we drink of it.
Go big or go home is sort of my philosophy.
Tastes good. All right. Tell us where we're headed.
Okay, so I'm going to do a brief summary about Gabby Petito's case so we can kind of have some background. I know you and I have talked about it a little bit, and I'll try to be brief and explain Gabby Petito was sort of a van life vlogger. So that's one of these people who are sort of living out of like a converted van, traveling while they do that, and vlogging, blogging, all of that. So she had like a small social media following prior to everything that happened.
And she was young.
She was young. She had just turned 22, I believe. So like fairly young.
She was so pretty.
So pretty, which kind of goes into why this case blew up in the way it did. Like I said, she had a following from doing sort of her van life vlogging. And at this point, she's traveling with her boyfriend recently turned fiance, Bryan Laundrie. Did I say that right this time?
I don't know. Honestly don't know if it's Laundrie or Laundrie, but I think we're going to go with Laundrie.
Yes.
Apologies if we've got it wrong.
I mean, I don't feel like apologizing to them. So if I mispronounce it truly, like if I mispronounce their name, it is what it is.
Chelsey has very strong opinions about things.
Yes, I do. I mean, are we shocked? But quickly, so they're traveling sort of to a couple of the national parks, more on like the West Coast. Something happens. And there is a recorded video of sort of an interaction with the police, and that's in Utah. Some sort of witnesses had called, and we'll get into it with the complaint, it's very specific, but witnesses called, said there was some sort of domestic dispute. So there's this like body cam footage. After that, the timeline is a lot of what the complaint is about, is what happened exactly when. But quickly, he essentially returns to Florida where his parents live without Gabby. Gabby's parents have not heard from her. They are on the national news saying we're missing Gabby. Someone give us information. Unfortunately, a little bit later, her remains were found. Shortly after that, Bryan was missing, and his remains were then found. So very sad.
He was found in Florida.
In Florida, yes, sorry. She was found in Utah, I believe, yes. It's like Grand Teton is in Utah, yes?
Yeah, I think the incident that was caught on police cam was in Moab.
Yes.
But I can't remember where she was found, but I think it was still Utah. It was definitely West Coast, and I think National Park related.
I know it's Grand Teton National Park, but I think it's in Utah. There might be some other states that border it. Not really relevant, but sort of that's what happens. Her cause of death was determined to be manual strangulation, and his cause of death turned out to be suicide.
Self-inflicted.
Self-inflicted gunshot wound, and he left sort of a notebook with not necessarily what we would consider a suicide note. It was like a half-hearted confession to killing Gabby and then saying he was going to take his own life to make it right. I clearly have a lot of feelings about why he wrote that in the manner.
But that's what he wrote.
But that's what he wrote. But that's what he wrote. He said there was an accident, she was hurt, and he was putting her out of her misery, which just like grosses me out because that's like very obviously not what happened.
Oh, fascinating. Well, she did have blunt force trauma.
Yes. But he said she broke her leg and that right. Like she had fallen and hurt her leg and then had other injuries. It was a lie. It was a lie. Like it was just him trying to absolve himself maybe.
Interesting.
And all of this is playing out in the national news because Gabby was young, beautiful. She was on social media. So this blew up and it was like minute by minute you could hear the coverage. I'm sure everyone kind of knows what we're talking about.
I remember the news coverage. I don't know as many of the facts as you do, but yes. I do remember the news coverage.
Everywhere.
She was missing. They couldn't find her. He was alive. He was without her. Yes. I remember all of that.
And so people, and essentially what happens is her parents are like begging for one to help us find her, then for sort of answers about what happened. And his parents are not. And this is where some of the lawsuits come in. They did their best to stay out of the media. They were issuing a lot of statements through their attorney.
Bryan Laundrie's family.
I would make the argument that the statements they were giving were callous and cruel, but we can dive into it. So our first lawsuit.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us what the first lawsuit was, who it was by, where it was.
Yes. So we're in Florida, which is where Bryan Laundrie's family is. And where Gabby was living at the time. Prior to them traveling in the van, they were living with his family in Florida. I believe her parents are divorced. So we have Nicole Schmidt and I don't know his first name, Mr. Petito. It's Joseph Petito.
Okay.
So similar to we had way back in like the OJ cases. But it's just her parents, and they're both remarried. So sometimes on the list, you can see their like step parents' names. But anyways, super random. They bring a suit. Well, not they. As Nicole Schmidt, as the executor of Gabby's estate, brings a suit against Bryan Laundrie's estate. So essentially, the people in the courtroom are going to be the parents.
Right.
But they're not actual parties to the suit.
Yeah, this goes back to the wrongful death suits.
Yes.
So we talked about this on the Law Unscripted.
Yes.
And we also talked about it on the first Legal Weekly one with Casey Anthony, is who can bring a wrongful death suit. And that's what appears to have been this first lawsuit, is the estate, the remaining estate of Gabby Petito. So she can't sue on her own behalf. Right. She has passed away. So in most states, they allow someone to step into their shoes and sue another party. So as I understand it, exactly what you're saying, these parties that are listed are the representatives of the estate or the guardian of the estate, trustee of the estate, however it would be listed in a specific state. But in this particular one, it's the representative of the estate, where they take on the role of Gabby. They step into Gabby's shoes and sue for her death. But the person they're suing is also dead.
Yes.
So it becomes, they have to sue, they're suing Bryan Laundrie, but what they're doing is they're suing the estate, because that's all that's left of him too.
Absolutely.
So now you've got one estate against another estate for wrongful death.
Exactly. And that complaint was very simple, very straightforward. Bryan, they're alleging Bryan was responsible, not guilty, responsible. Look, caught it there, caught it.
Good. Now we're learning things. This is a civil case. Yes. If he were pursued in a criminal court, he would have to be alive in order to do the criminal court. He wasn't alive. He did a self-inflicted wound. He's passed. So you can't bring a crime. You have a civil lawsuit, and that's where you're found responsible or liable, but not guilty.
So that's exactly what happens in this case. They file the complaint. It's it's the shortest of the ones that we have here. Very straightforward. He is liable for Gabby's death. They got very close to going to trial.
Okay.
So I know they were in settlement negotiations for a while. The trial was set for December, I believe this was of 2021, and November, so just a little bit before, they ended up settling out of court, and the court enters a judgment. How much do you think it was for?
Oh, wait, was this 2021 or 2022?
Let me see here. I believe this one was 2021.
Okay.
Yes, this was 2021.
Okay. Goodness. Wrongful death suits tend to be a lot.
Actually, let me correct myself. I do believe that was 2022.
Okay, so recent.
Yes,
this was recently that it finished.
Yes, that was my fault. I don't know why I thought it was earlier.
I think the 2021 is when she passed. I think that's when the events happened. Yes. So the lawsuit then was 2022.
That's correct.
You were absolutely thinking the right timeline, because the 2021 is when the events happened.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It was like the August to Octobers of 21, and then the suit was in 2022.
Okay.
How much do you, and again, so these are people who are young, their estates. I'm 27, and I know I would not have an estate that was all that spectacular if I were to pass away. So Gabby was 22. I believe Bryan was like 24.
Okay.
How much do you think the judgment against his estate was for?
As a wrongful death suit for a woman who is young and clearly going places, had how many decades to live?
Right.
It had to be over $1 million.
It was $3 million.
Wow.
So that seems shocking to me. Okay. And I think it's interesting the way you think about it, because in my mind, I'm like, Bryan did not have $1 million, let alone 3, right? And
you're not about what he had.
Okay, see, that's that lawyer brain, because truly me, initially thinking about it, I was like, he doesn't have anything. Like, he lives with his parents. What are they going to get, right? Cynical side. I'm just like, this is pointless. But I think it was more about the accountability, especially for the parents. And they have said whatever they are able to recover. I mean, they have the $3 million judgment. Bryan didn't have $3 million. It's likely that his parents also did not have $3 million. I mean, who knows? I guess we'll find out with these newer suits. But whatever they do recover, they want to donate to Gabby Petito. So, they've created like an organization, some sort of memorial fund that helps other people who are victims of domestic violence. And so they're going to donate whatever they do recover. So it's kind of sad, but I'd be interested to see how much they actually get.
Yeah, this is going back to the practical where you're thinking on it of why would you sue if clearly he doesn't have $3 million? Of course he doesn't have $3 million. So what's the point of a lawsuit?
Right.
There are a few. If there were insurance that might cover some sort of homeowner's policy, it's not an auto policy. You'd have to tap into some sort of policy to recover from insurance.
Life insurance, maybe?
Well, and that's where there would be money in the estate.
Right.
Not an insurance coverage that would cover him for the acts. And most insurance companies, even if it was some kind of homeowner's policy you could get into, are only cover for negligent acts and not intentional acts like murder. They usually, that's an exclusion in their policy. They won't pay out for that.
If you intentionally cause someone's wrongful death versus if you negligently cause their death.
But if he had life insurance, depending on where his beneficiaries were, if it went straight to a beneficiary such as his mother, then it's not in his estate. It passes free and clear to his mom.
Really?
Yeah. But if he had a life insurance policy and if it passed just to himself or his estate, then that money can be tapped into because his estate was tagged by the lawsuit. But it is very unlikely that if he had life insurance, it would be $3 million worth of life insurance. So whatever he would have in his bank accounts that weren't used to debts, whatever assets he actually had would go toward that $3 million. But in this case, it doesn't seem like the judgment is about the money so much as the judgment is about this was wrong. Right. This was wrong and someone should be held accountable even if he's dead, and we want the accountability to be seen in the public eye because it's unacceptable. We don't want someone to be subject to domestic abuse.
Exactly.
Which I think was the claim.
Yeah, I think the claim was that there was a sort of tumultuous, if not abusive relationship dynamic happening, and that eventually escalated to the point of him killing her. And so that lawsuit, it seemed pretty straightforward. Now, the two we're going to talk about next.
And that one's done.
That one is done. Like I said, they got the judgment of $3 million. This attorney for the Laundrie family gave like this, again, very just callous statement of just, well, great. Now they have a piece of paper that says they, have $3 million, which, okay, it's true.
It's not untrue.
But like... if you don't have anything to say that's nice, like don't say anything at all.
Yeah.
I have clearly a lot of opinions based on what I have learned about this attorney. Small point before we get to that. This attorney, at the very beginning of things, I think even before they discover her remains or shortly after, was advertising her face on his website. He had signed
Gabby's face?
Yes.
As the defense attorney?
As a defense attorney.
What was he advertising?
Using her name, because at this point, I guess that he had entered into some sort of retainer agreement with the Laundrie family, and was like essentially using like search engine optimization because this is an ongoing national story to like promote his business. Super gross, right? Like gross.
It doesn't. The smell test is bad on that. I don't know the attorney's ethics rules in Florida, but every state, not even most state, every jurisdiction has an ethics code for attorneys.
Yes.
In Maryland, it's the professional rules of conduct. Each is called something different. There's a standard ABA approved. These are the rules we like you to have. But most are modeled off of that.
Yeah.
And there are very strict rules for advertising and marketing for lawyers in each state. I mean, that's why even this, we have to be careful to say, on our show, here we go.
Yes.
Disclaimer is I'm not your attorney. I am not advertising myself as your attorney. This is not creating a relationship between us. This is a podcast for educational purposes and analytics.
Yes.
So we have to see that for our ethics.
That's what
Chelsey's
I'm saying.
not an attorney. So
yes.
we have to, if we're doing that, there's such strict rules for advertising. It wasn't even allowed until, just a couple decades ago. They finally allowed lawyer advertising. But the smell test is bad. I would be very interested to know what the actual ethics rules are in his jurisdiction.
I would be too. And as we'll get into it shortly, even with that, it continues. This person I will say it. Okay, and this is to me the perfect example. You are an attorney and you're very careful with your words. You give lots of disclaimers.
I have to be.
The way he just talks to the press seems reckless. I feel like I never know what's coming out of my mouth, and I would not.
I never know either.
Honestly, fair. But I would not say the things this man is saying. One, because I'm not a jerk, but someone's child is dead. Mm-hmm. This woman was killed. Gabby was killed. Yeah. And then, the Laundrie family is who they are, but their son is dead too. This is a very tragic situation, all around.
Oh, it's awful.
And just his complete, just coldness just continues to shock me. It's awful. But we will get into this now second lawsuit.
Okay.
So we had sort of the estates suing each other. The second, we have a puppy in the background.
Yeah, for those of us here, for those of you who are following us, we do have dogs. We love our dogs. They're our support staff. We consider them supportive. And my dogs are wandering around in the background. You might be able to hear their tip taps. And my poor dog Charlie, who's my golden cocker spaniel, he is finding our cords, our cords that are running in the background that you can't see. He's having difficulty navigating the cords and finding a place to lay down. So.
Just a customized, parkour course for him.
It really is. And he's not doing so well with the course here, the ropes course.
So sweet, though. He's on the couch now. So.
Okay. He's at least found a spot with our one of our other dogs. But yeah, anyway, we love our dogs. Yes. Check them out on our website, on our other podcast.
You'll see them. We can't. We're not getting rid of them. I don't care.
No.
I don't care. I don't care.
There is a question about the other one where we're sitting on our couches and they're somewhat distracting. We don't care, but the question is, do our viewers care? I don't know. We may not care anyway.
No, I think it'll be fine. Okay, so both of the next lawsuits I'm talking about are ongoing. This is current litigation. So we will start with the one, we'll stay in Florida for a second.
Okay.
So this lawsuit is specifically from Gabby's parents. So Nicole Schmidt and Joseph Petito. And I believe the step-parents are listed. I would have to double check. But
not as the estate. They're not representatives of the estate. They're for themselves.
For themselves.
Okay.
Suing the Laundries, who are still together. I think it's Roberta and someone else. But those parents are still married. Suing them as themselves for their actions. Right? Your face, you're like, okay.
For their own actions, not for Bryan's.
Oh, nothing to do with Bryan's actions.
So it can't be a wrongful death suit.
It's not a wrongful death. I think the closest to what it would... So I have that complaint here with the cover sheet where you check the little boxes.
Yes.
So it's listed under negligence, but not specified to what. And you're
okay, unspecified negligence.
Unspecified
general negligence.
And so when they're sort of listing what they're alleging, I would compare it to intentional infliction of pain and suffering, emotional distress, etc. Okay. I don't know what the exact terminology in Florida would be, but that seems what the claim is that you intentionally inflicted emotional distress on our families. Which I'm intrigued by this.
That is intriguing.
I've never seen anything. Not that I would have the expertise to have seen so many things. I've never seen anything like this.
And they're very rare. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. I will tell you, in law school, you spend ages on this topic.
Yes.
But in my 17 years, I don't see it very often. No. If I see it, it is usually tied in with something else and not by itself.
Right.
And it is very hard to prove because it's that intentional tort versus the just negligent tort that someone did something wrong without intending to, but their actions were so grossly reckless or endangering that it happened. So Do you have the actual wording of the suit?
I do. Because this is what I find most interesting. Also, in this one, and we briefly talked about this, and maybe you can sort of explain it better than I can, about the amount. So we talked about the difference between like suing in district or circuit court. Mm-hmm. And so in the first lawsuit, they said damages upwards of $30,000.
Exceeding, in excess of $30,000.
Yes. This one, they do not specify an amount.
Oh.
Right?
Did they do a different court then?
No.
Same court.
And I will read you the little last page, where they...
The wherefore. Mm-hmm. There's language at the end of a lawsuit. For those of you who don't know, at the end of every lawsuit, I think in every state, at least the 3 jurisdictions I do, you have to put, here are the, comes now plaintiff so-and-so against defendant. These are the allegations. And then at the end of all of your allegations, you say, wherefore plaintiff is asking for damages in the amount of... Sometimes it's in excess of, in a specific amount, or just damages. Depends on your jurisdiction.
So here's where we are. And I will read sort of the last little, when you do a complaint, you do the little numbers and all of the things you're alleging. So I'll read that. As a direct and proximate result of the willfulness and maliciousness of Christopher Laundrie and Roberta Laundrie, Joseph Petito and Nicole Schmidt had been caused to suffer pain and suffering, mental anguish, inconvenience, loss of capacity for enjoyment of life experienced in the past and to be experienced in the future.
Okay.
Wherefore plaintiffs...
So that's their damages. That's what they're claiming, how they're damaged. And there's the wherefore. What is the wherefore?
Blah, 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 blah. And award to them just compensation for damages they have suffered together with cost and such other relief as this honorable court deems just and appropriate.
So it's a general request for damages as the court or a jury would decide.
Yes. Okay. So now in my mind, when I first saw sort of this part of it, I'm like, okay, what could they have done that they're claiming? Like, we know what Bryan did. Bryan killed somebody. But what did the parents do?
Yeah, why in the world are they being sued?
Right. And I think, at least, because I was paying pretty close attention to the case, like when it was actively happening, it was kind of confusing. There was a lot of, like I said, they would not speak to anybody.
The Laundrie family.
The Laundrie family was really just locked down, which, I mean, it's like solid legal advice, right?
That's what I would have said if someone had hired me, is do not talk to anyone. And if you do, your statement should be, this is a tragedy. We are trying to deal with it. Please be mindful and kind about the suffering that we're all enduring. That's what I would have said. And honestly, if you can't do that, just let me say it. And let me say, we are so sorry for the loss of both children. This is a tragedy. We ask that you respect their privacy at this time. That is it.
Well, you nailed exactly what happened. And what the complaint alleges, it goes into sort of very specific sort of text messages and Facebook messages that Nicole, Gabby's mom, had sent to Roberta.
Okay, so Gabby's mother to Bryan's mother.
Yes, to Bryan's mother. And it also, like I said, at the very beginning, Gabby was just a missing person. And I think there was a lot of belief that she was alive. I truly think that's where the investigation was operating from, where her parents were operating from.
You have to have hope.
I think that, and I think their assumption, and I am just speculating here, but from what I've seen, it was sort of that maybe Bryan and Gabby had gotten into a fight. He left her somewhere and just left. I think that was sort of the thought process.
That he left her to figure it out for herself, and she was...
And, maybe something happened, which is why she hadn't called anybody, but that I don't think at the very beginning they thought that she was deceased. I don't think that was the belief. However... So they're on the news saying, if anybody knows anything, please. They're like begging. It's like heartbreaking to watch. It's going to make me, oh my gosh, it like make me tears up. And they're begging his family, the Laundrie family, like, if you guys know anything, please, like, we just want our daughter. We just want to, and then once it was kind of clear that Gabby was probably not alive, they're like, please, we just want her remains. Tell us if she's alive. Tell us anything. Well, Roberta blocked Nicole, Gabby's mother, on her phone number, blocked her from Facebook, and then they issue this statement that is, and I will read it exactly because this is the cause of essentially, this is the crux of the lawsuit right here.
And it's in the lawsuit.
Yes.
And where does she issue the statement?
Oh, well, the attorney, as you were saying earlier, the attorney issues this statement on behalf of the Laundrie family. And I will read it to you. And this is on September 14th, 2021. It is our understanding that a search has been organized for Miss Petito in or near Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. On behalf of the Laundrie family, it is our hope that the search for Miss Petito is successful and that Miss Petito is reunited with her family. That was the statement from the Laundrie family given by their attorney.
Okay.
And that was on September 14th, right? Shortly thereafter, Gabby's remains were found. It was clear that this was not like she died yesterday, right?
Right, that she had been there for a little while.
Yes. And so what they're alleging in this complaint is that with full knowledge that Gabby was not alive, they issued this statement.
So they were giving a false statement of hope.
Yes.
When they knew that there was none.
Yes. So and they get into sort of more details, but that's essentially the crux of the lawsuit, is that you either wouldn't talk to us, and then when you gave a statement, sort of put out this hope. And the truth is that you knew your son had killed Gabby weeks before.
So basically, you shouldn't have said anything. It would have been better for you if you had said nothing, or if you had said prayers for everyone.
Yes.
Rather than, we hope they find her.
We hope they find her and she's alive and well and like reunited with her family.
So it's that extra step that they took of what they said.
Yes. And I think that is the question is what they knew and when. And so we can talk about this of the thought of when and why to file a lawsuit, discovery. I think that's what's going to really determine this case.
Yeah. If the judge, I'll be interested to see if it passes summary judgment of, is this claim valid enough for a negligence suit? Is it something, okay, they held out hope based on this statement, but was there, here we go back to the duty of care.
Right.
In a negligence lawsuit, you have to show that there was a duty, someone owed you a duty of care, and then they breached that duty of care. And this is a case where I think those questions come into play. There's causation of, I was injured by your statement. I held out hope for your statement. That caused me damage, and the emotional effect, the mental toll that took. So this is the odd case where you go from, okay, causation and damages are fairly clear, but the duty and breach isn't as clear. What duty did the Laundrie family have to the Petito family? Did they have any duty at all? And if they had a duty, was this statement a breach of that duty? And this is great. This is like the perfect week to talk about it. If you're interested in this particular issue, go back to the Law Unscripted that we did on Tuesday at the first week of January. I think it would have been our episode 4 of the Law Unscripted, where we break down what are the elements, what are the things you have to prove in negligence. And this hits it. It's perfect timing.
I think this does touch on a lot of things we've talked about, either with Casey Anthony on the show or sort of in the Law Unscripted leading up into this point. I would almost liken it to, we all understand sort of what obstruction of justice is. Like, you can be arrested for that, right?
That's a crime.
That's a crime.
Usually.
And so we talk about sort of civil and criminal having similar things. I think sort of what they're alleging is almost like a civil version of obstructing the investigation.
Interesting.
Because in the mix of all of this, prior to Bryan killing himself, they were kind of hiding him. And they're saying that they're not, but they were.
So how does that fit into the lawsuit, if at all? And I'm pouring you a little bit more.
Do.
I'm pouring myself some. This is extremely good wine.
I'm glad you like it. See?
I do enjoy it, and it may have to be one of the staples in mine, in addition to the Dark Horse, because it's very, very nice, very
bottle,
sweet.
$10. It's my favorite wine in the world.
That's a really good purchase. I like getting good value.
Same.
And it's delightful.
And it's delicious, right? That's what I'm saying.
And it says, so what it says on the bottle is hints of berries and dark cherries with fizz. Pairs well with friends, family, and fun.
See, I love it.
What is this? Great bottle, great choice, great wine.
I'm so glad you like it. See, I've never had anybody not like it, but when I'm like, hey, it's a sweet, sparkling red that was $10, like the faces I get, and I'm like, no, trust me, it's so good.
No, it's really good.
I'm so glad you like it.
And it's a big bottle, so it would go for a long time, or lots of us.
That's what I'm thinking.
Lots of friends, but Two are good.
Yeah.
Pull up your own bottle of wine. We hope that you're enjoying one. And if you have one that you like, put it in the comments. We are more than happy to taste it, to comment on it. We are not wine connoisseurs. We aren't the sommeliers. Clearly we aren't. But we do like a good bottle of wine, and we'll be happy to drink one and comment on it. We may not have your same palate, but we'll look at it, taste it.
I've never met a drink I didn't like.
Yeah, the beers are a little bit different.
Oh, that's true. That's true. I don't really do beer.
You don't do beers. I like beers. It's just a question of which ones. I'm not a huge fan of IPAs. Sorry, everybody. I don't like the stouts.
Okay, what do you drink? What is like your go-to beer?
I like Sam Adams. I love the summer ale is one of my go-tos. I like a regular Yingling.
Really?
Yeah.
Fascinating. I've never...
You don't drink beer,
no,
so I don't
drink
beer in front of you.
Have you ever had a White Claw?
Yeah. Yeah, I have. It's okay.
They're okay.
Yeah, I mean it's almost like a cider. I mean it's like a sparkling drink.
Yeah.
Not my favorite. I would rather have just a cider.
Okay.
Or one of these sparkling wines versus a White Claw.
Yeah, it does kind of taste like TV static, right? Like that.
It's bubbly, right?
Right. It's like a LaCroix with like vodka.
Yeah, it's really not my favorite flavor, not for my palate. I would much rather have a bottle of wine than that or something, but it's good for those of you who like it. It's, it's all about your personal taste, right? It's what do you like? What tastes good to you? And
hey,
how you enjoy it.
I think everyone will love this wine. I highly recommend it. Let me know if you try it and you do.
Put it in the comments. Let us know if you liked it and if you buy the next 10 bottles or or if you don't. And again, comment. Tell us what you want. Tell us about the wines that you like, but also tell us about the different cases. We're trying to hit the hottest topics of the week. And Gabby Petito is just a continuing one that is fascinating legally.
But it's funny you say that because what you led into this perfectly, because in the past 2 weeks, there has been a motion to amend this complaint that we were just talking about.
This same complaint?
The one that we're talking about.
Okay,
yes.
What are they doing?
So that's what brought it back up for me of we've got to talk about this is, I think it was December 12th, something around that time frame.
Very recently.
So super recently, they filed a motion to amend the complaint. And so that sounds like I will let you tell me. When you file a motion like that, those are pretty much just typically granted, right? Like it's a pretty standard motion.
Again, it depends. Here's my lawyer answer, and I give it so many times when we talk. This is ridiculous, but I'm an attorney, so it depends. It depends on which state you're in. It depends on how early or late the case is. Okay. So if I work in Virginia, or one of my jurisdictions is Virginia, and previously you could file a motion to amend any time before the defense was served. So before the defendant got the lawsuit, you could file a motion to amend. You could amend the lawsuit. Then you get a new copy of the summons. You send that out, the defendant's served. Pretty standard practice. Okay. There's a new rule in Virginia within the last year or two that you can still file a motion to amend before the defendant even gets notice of this lawsuit through service. But you have to still go through the judge. That you can do the motion, but a judge still has to review it. Sometimes there's still a hearing. Oh. You have to give evidence at the hearing or argue at the hearing as the attorney as to why it should be granted. And then generally it's granted if there's a logical reason, if it fits in with the lawsuit, you're not trying to do something super tricky, and it's still before the defendant is served. But I'll tell you, once the defendant is served, once the defendant has the actual copy of the lawsuit, it is harder to amend the lawsuit. You still have time frames. So each state will say you have this many months. They'll do what's called a scheduling order, and they'll say you have this many months to add additional parties to the lawsuit. So add other plaintiffs, add other defendants. And in order to add parties, that is an amendment. You have to amend the complaint in order to add parties, which is called joinder. So most states have the ability to make a motion to amend a complaint to join a party, but it's not a given. You have to usually you have to present a copy of the amended motion or at least arguments as to what it would look like, what party would be there, why the party would be included, how that party's related to this case.
Right.
And then the judge decides.
So that's super interesting you say that because they have filed a motion to amend the complaint to add a party. They want to add a defendant. They want to sue the attorney, the Laundrie's attorney.
Wow. Wow. The actual attorney.
The actual attorney. So prelim thoughts on my end. So what they're alleging here is essentially you knew Bryan killed Gabby weeks before this, right? And so this is interesting because now that we're talking about attorney, we're talking about attorney-client privilege. It gets very complicated because, and this is an assumption on my part, but after reading that complaint, they are trying to add the attorney. I'm assuming the facts are going to be pretty much the same.
Generally, they are. If it's a motion to amend the complaint, the basic facts of the case would normally remain the same in the complaint. You would add additional facts as to why what this party did to cause your damages.
Yes.
But the basic facts would stay the same.
So based off of that, my assumption is that they are going to also allege that the attorney knew for a fact Gabby was dead.
And made the statement.
And made the statement. Even though it was a statement on behalf of his clients, he was the one who got in front of the cameras and made the statement. And so since I recently passed the MPRE, let's just all say a thank you for that one because
I am clapping in front of the microphone. I don't care if it makes funny noise. Yay, Chelsey.
It was a close call. It wasn't, but I was very concerned. But
it's the multi-state professional responsibility exam. She has to pass it before taking the bar or becoming an attorney because you have to know your ethics rules. And she passed it. So yay.
I'm so glad. But based on my understanding of these ethics rules, you can't lie, right? Like you can't knowingly lie is the better word. The knowing is the key point, right? Is that if you know something to be completely true or you know something to be completely false, you can't say it if it's false.
As an attorney, you can't. Or you definitely can't in a court of law.
Right.
Almost all ethics rules in every jurisdiction cover you cannot lie before a tribunal. You have to present the truth. And most rules even go to not only must you present the truth or not lie, but if you know there's contrary evidence out there, you also have to present that before the judge. Again, these really strict ethical rules for attorneys. The question, though, is, okay, maybe he violated the attorney ethics rules by what he said, but he wasn't in front of a court. He wasn't under oath. So is it negligence? Is it actual negligence for him to say these things in public, even if he knew?
See,
they'll have to prove he knew, but even if he knew. That's where my brain went.
Because, and you can help, I'm thinking through this out loud right now. Because my initial thought was, if we can assume they can prove that he knew, I, with my limited experience, think there's a claim there worth going to court over. You know, I think that would survive sort of a motion to dismiss or summary judgment.
I'm so excited to find out if they will be allowed to even add him as a party.
Right. So this is my thing that I think that they might get sort of torn up on is that even if they're allowed to add him as a party, the documents you would need to prove that he knew, I think would be protected.
They might be. As
that would be my
you
thought.
Said, the attorney-client privilege, it's very closely guarded and closely held by courts, by attorneys. You don't want to break into that privilege. But there are certain times and ways that you can break that privilege and obtain information. I just don't know if this is the time. And if so, I mean, the court motions that are going to happen, the in-camera reviews that the judge may have to do.
Yes. Stop there, because I just learned about this recently.
Oh.
Did you guys catch that? The in-camera review. Tell us about that, because it has been in the last week or so that I learned about this.
Really?
Yes.
You didn't know this?
No, I was doing some project, but I was looking at something for family law, I think, that it was, or maybe it was more than a week, but like something for family law that was talking about sort of foster care and like Department of Child and Family Services records, that they're not necessarily completely closed off. Like if there is a lawsuit, the judge can look at them. And that's what I was looking at. And that's where I heard that term for the first time. So tell us about it.
But you had a family law class last semester.
The quality of that class was questionable.
Okay. So it sounds like that never came up in your class, that there would be an in-camera review.
I have never heard the word in-camera review until probably 2 weeks ago.
And she's a third-year law student.
But that's a practical thing, not a bar thing. When you think about it like that, is that like they're not going to ask you something about that on the bar? Well, maybe.
But they might.
But it's more of a practical.
It's more of a practical, the actual practice of law. And again, this is why it kills me. And I love Chelsey, and I'm so glad you're here.
I will ask the dumb questions.
We go back to this, but that's a whole reason the Law Unscripted company exists, because what we have figured out, and it maybe shouldn't have been as, awe-inspiring as it was, but people don't know how to actually practice law and what happens in the practice of law. Normal people don't understand the normal practice of law. Attorneys sometimes don't even understand the practice of law, let's be honest. Young attorneys, new attorneys don't. And law students, the practice is so much different than what they learn on a theoretical level in law school. Mm-hmm. And there's just this need for, where do you find this practical information? How do you know what to do when you get into a court? And here's another example is what is an in-camera review? I don't know. Put it in the comments. Did you know what it was? Had you ever heard of this? And if you had, tell us what your experience is.
And where you heard it from, because I may not be like a top 10% student, but I try to pay attention.
You're a good law student.
I try to do well, but truly, this was a recent thing that I learned about. And this is even like I had prior experience before law school, like working, volunteering in the foster care system, like going to court and giving reports, and I still did not know about this.
Okay. So an in-camera review, after all that talk about it, is my kvetching, is when the judge can view evidence in his chambers by himself, in camera. That's what it is. It's a Latin term or something like that.
Probably.
But the legal term is in camera, and it basically means that the judge doesn't have to hear it in open court, in public. It's not a part of the public record. It is either a witness or arguments by attorneys or documents that a judge would review outside of the court reporter, outside of the public, and decide, is this information something that should be entered into the public as part of the public trial for the jury, for the record of the trial, or is it something that should be kept out?
Right.
And then there's sometimes where it's not a decision as to whether evidence comes in or gets kept out, and the judge is reviewing it. But sometimes it's a review of a witness, a child. A lot of foster care, family law issues are the child wants to say something, wants to testify, but it shouldn't be in public. And they'll be taken back to the judge's chambers, and the judge will talk to them personally and privately. That is still also considered an in-camera review. It's not the same thing. It's actually not quite the same thing. Okay. If you look back at the definition of in-camera review, I think I'm right on this, but God help me, it might not be. But I think the in-camera review is mostly of evidence.
Right.
Whereas actual testimony for a judge that would be outside of the normal protocol, outside of the normal courtroom, is something else, which I can't come up with the word right now, but it's the similar idea that a judge can consider something
testimony.
else.
Testimony, I was totally tracking that. I totally knew that. I had seen that when children needed to testify. That made sense to me, but I didn't know about the evidence. Like, it made total sense, but it was the first time I had heard of it.
Yeah, it's especially for again, you go back to the attorney rules, is if something comes up where I would be tagged as an attorney to turn over client files, client information, my notes about a client. I don't want those coming out. Even the information that I give you, either just talking or on these podcasts especially, I give general information.
Yeah, never specific.
But yeah, I don't name client names. I'm, usually not even supposed to say that I represent a specific client by name. So in order to turn over that information, I would absolutely ask for an in-camera review. I don't want it just in public. I don't want it in depositions. I don't want it in a courtroom.
Right.
I want the judge to determine, should it even come in, because it is extremely private information.
Right.
I am held to a duty of care to my client. So let the judge tell me it comes in. If the judge says in an in-camera review that evidence based on his review is relevant, is material, whatever it is, let him decide, let him make me turn it over, but I'm not turning it over without a court order.
Exactly.
Just saying.
So this is where I think that they might get a little stuck, is that in my mind, the things that would prove that he knew and then gave a false statement would be conversations between the Laundries and himself, which
That they would have told him.
Because that's right, like that'd be the only way he really knew.
Yeah, it's not like he walked out to Utah or the West Coast and found her.
But it does like give a little bit reminiscing of sort of the buried bodies cases from law school.
Oh, tell us about those, especially from law school. Gruesome. Please don't misunderstand our excitement and our interest. We are not laughing at people. These are fascinating issues. And this one, most law students find this fascinating. And most law students, they can even get into yelling matches about why this is even allowed. So go for it.
So I have very strong feelings, and make sure I don't miss any of the details. I might. It's been a second. But essentially there's these two attorneys, right? They're representing a client. He tells them in the shield of sort of that attorney-client relationship, I've killed it's 2 bodies, right? Was it 2 bodies?
I think there are multiple cases on it.
Yes. I think the one I'm
dead
thinking
body
of.
cases.
I think the one I'm thinking of is that he'd either killed 1 person or 2. He tells them, right? Like he tells them, I did it. Here's where the bodies are. Like
Tells them where they are.
that is protected information. As long as you're not going to commit a future crime, it's protected information. However, at the same time, like parallel to this, there's a man in a criminal trial who is on trial for these murders, who is then convicted and put on death row.
A man who did not commit it.
No, not
And
their
the attorneys
client.
knew.
And their attorneys knew basically the whole time because their client had told them. So then you get into this like legal ethics debate of like, you are not allowed to break client confidentiality, break that protected relationship. Can't do it. So they know this information the whole time. I think at one point they even went out and like verified it was true.
Is this the one where they climbed in a trash can, or is that another case?
I think that's another one. And I could be mixing some of them up.
There were quite a few of them. The dead body cases.
Yes.
Even if you're not in law school, look it up.
They're wild. So essentially, they wait. Now, all these years later, their client has died. This man is still on death row. We're talking decades later, right? The wrong person. They know unequivocally it is the wrong person. And so at this point, when their client dies, they contact like the ethics hotline you can call. And they're like, hey, because attorney-client confidentiality does not die when you die. It does not die with the client. But in this case, they're like, okay, like our client can't face any negative side effects. This man is on death row. And it becomes this whole thing. There's like the ethical debate. And essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, the rule now is that like you are not compelled to break that, even if you know. Yeah. I'm sorry. This is my hot take. I will not be an attorney anymore. I'm not going to let somebody wither away on death row. I will find another job. I'm sorry. Like, I understand.
You will just turn in your license, violate the ethics rules.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Get the information.
I'm not going to let somebody sit on death row. And I know that this is the yelling match that happened in our ethics class. Because
that's why this is so controversial.
Yes.
Is the attorney rules, the ethics rules, I think in almost all states, if not all of them, say that if you have this information, you cannot tell it to anyone. Yes. No one.
Even if someone is on death row.
Even if someone's in death row falsely accused, you cannot tell anyone. But the moral part of it.
Yeah, so they end up, in this case, I'll give you some closure. They eventually work it out with they call the ethics board, they figure it out. It gets very convoluted, very complicated. That man eventually gets out of prison.
Eventually.
But eventually. I mean, it was like 30, 40 years. So, I do believe in the importance of client confidentiality, right? Like, I get it.
It's
I
huge.
do.
You have
I'm not going to break
it.
that. But if the client is dead and a man is on death row, that seems like a very clear, easy decision to me, personally.
The moral decision, again, this is why it's so controversial. And a lot of attorneys don't like the idea of becoming criminal defense attorneys because there's this idea of, well, everybody confesses. And if I know that they did it, but I'm still representing them and they get off, well, then how can I live with myself? So that's something you have to consider. Now, not every criminal defendant admits their crimes. If they've actually done it, not all of them actually admit them to their attorneys. A lot of criminal defense attorneys, including myself, will say, look, they don't tell me. I don't ask specifically because I don't want to know.
But
it would keep me up at night. And when I was doing it's can you live with yourself with knowing that you have done your job and your ethical duty? This is your ethical duty to clients. Can you live with yourself? It doesn't happen often, okay? You're not going to have every other client coming and confessing to murder. It's not, this is not a dime a dozen case. This is the rare incident, which is why it's such a huge case, is it's the big one that was different than most. But it is a consideration that you have to think of as what kind of attorney are you going to be? And are you willing to risk this? And can you live with yourself for doing that? It's kind of like a priest.
No, it is. I mean, and that's
priests
just like
here. How much, how many crimes are actually confessed to a priest? They keep it.
And I have feelings about the fact they're allowed to keep it. Clearly, I've never been shied away.
Too.
It's their duty, but I do have a problem with the fact that the law protects it because that just seems particularly problematic to me. But so does pretty much, it's clear. I have a lot of problems with the law, obviously.
We're not sure she's actually going to choose to be an attorney next year, but I don't know. We're going to hope.
Look, you got to just break it from the inside, okay? But this ties into this case, the idea of like a criminal defense attorney, it's the knowing part, right? Like that's the key element is that you can't knowingly lie.
Right. If you know the information, don't tell the information.
But if he can say sort of that you're like in this like Schrodinger's cat kind of dynamic of like, well, I didn't know. I wasn't explicitly told. I mean, did I have a feeling? Do I have two brain cells? Right. But did I actual knowledge? Right. I think that's the thing there.
So did he violate a negligence common law rule?
Yes.
Or did he just, quote unquote, violate his legal ethics?
And that's even if he's allowed to be added.
If it's an ethical rule.
But this to me is something I will be following because it brings up these super intricate things. And I will say my bet on it. So the other lawsuit settled. There was no trial. Based on the personalities I have seen just in the news coverage, if any of them are going to go to trial, it's going to be this one.
Yeah, that it probably wouldn't settle.
That attorney cannot keep his mouth shut. He would not settle.
Well, that's the other question. I know we've got a third lawsuit to talk about, but that's the other piece is can this, if this attorney is added to the suit, I don't think he can actually represent them for the suit. He would be another party. He cannot be an attorney in the same suit where he's a named defendant. So they would have to get other counsel. Frankly, they should. I mean, now anyway, they should, because there's even the hint that they're trying to amend to include the attorney. I mean, honestly, even from the beginning, is that not a conflict, him representing Bryan and his parents? Not necessarily representing Bryan and his parents. That's not necessarily a conflict. And if it is a conflict, there are certain ways around it. Well, I know they can waive it. I think at least when Bryan was still alive, that like he was eventually charged with a crime that was not pursued, obviously, because then he was found dead. Passed. But I don't know. I think that seems tricky of like, what can you reveal into who if you're representing all three of these people? It is absolutely tricky. And you need, at the very least, you need conflicts of interest waivers. But it's it's the ethics rules. You have to look into these things as an attorney, and it's not necessarily advisable. Even if you can, you probably can. It sounds like you could, and there are reasons. But yeah, there's the thing is, should you? Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Right. It's permissible, but does that make it a great decision or great idea.
Right.
No, it is not a great idea. In fact, it's a horrible idea. You should get different counsel as soon as possible. And frankly, at this point, just my 2 cents is the best idea. Not that it has to be, but the best idea, if they haven't found other counsel at this point, would be to find other counsel. Because if he's even proposed to be a party to the defense, it would be better for him to have his own attorney, them to have their own attorney, and proceed that way.
Yes. So we will keep an eye on that one and let you know. And I will throw the third one at you.
Yeah, tell me the third one, because I know we're getting close. We don't want to overextend our happy hours, but we do want to make sure that we cover it. And I don't know that I want to get to the bottom of this bottle of wine, but go ahead and throw the third one out. So at least we hit all 3, because there is a third one.
And this is also ongoing at the moment. So
this one is I will tell you, she's going to tell you a lot more about it, but from what I know of it, it is absolutely brilliant legal maneuvering.
Yes.
Props to the attorneys. As a personal injury attorney, the attorneys who have grabbed onto this lawsuit in the art of law.
Yes.
Props. It's brilliant. Whether it's going to work, I don't know, but I love it. Mm-hmm. It's genius. It's interesting. It just might work. And I'm intrigued.
See, and I would almost agree. I think this is probably the strongest, most outside of the first estate versus estate. Yeah. This seems to be very clear, something that's not as inventive. You know? And this is, we're leaving Florida now and we're going out to Moab.
Going to Utah.
So in the very beginning, I said there was an incident, a traffic stop where the 2 witnesses had called in. The police then observed the vehicle that Gabby and Bryan were in, the van, I believe was speeding, and I know for sure also hit a curb.
Ugh.
So then they were pulled over.
Probable cause to stop.
There you go. Super clear. In that, Gabby is sort of shaking, hysterical. Bryan is laughing and seems very composed. And in the course, I believe it was 57 minutes, he tells the police officers he does not have a phone of his own, that they share a phone. And about 13 minutes later, he pulls out his phone and gives them the number. So there's a lot happening here. But so the suit is it's a double. So it's Gabby's parents on behalf of themselves and on behalf of her estate.
Okay, so it's
almost like the Nicole.
Actually, I think a wrongful death suit.
It is.
With her.
Yes.
Okay.
And then it's the sort of same like loss of enjoyment, companionship.
So the survivorship suit by her parents of saying, I'm surviving, and as a result of the death of my child, I've had certain damages myself.
Yes.
And then there's the suit on behalf of Gabby for the wrongful death as well.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so what they're alleging is that there was negligence by the police officers individually, negligence by the police department. I believe they listed the city too, who gives the money into the police department, and sort of saying that they should have recognized this is a domestic violence situation. They did not follow the letter of the law, which a recent law was passed in Utah that says any sort of call like this, someone needs to be arrested. It's not an officer discretion situation.
It's a have to.
It's a have to, which they didn't. They didn't arrest anybody. They separated them for the evening.
But there was no protective order either. It wasn't a protective order. There was no arrest.
So from my understanding, in Moab, in Utah, an automatic order of protection goes in place for that 24 hours.
Okay.
But anything past that, you would have to file for, have the police report for. And I don't know if I'm explaining this correctly, but that's my understanding based off of, there was also an investigative report based from an independent third party who came in.
Of the department. Of the police department.
Who came in, and I read most of it. It was about 200 pages of them saying, essentially the conclusion, summarizing is, yes, they did not follow the letter of the law. Yes, they did not follow protocol and policy, but none of it seemed intentional. And based on what I've seen, I would agree. I don't think these officers intended to do anything wrong, but they sort of identified Gabby as the primary aggressor in this domestic violence situation, and said if they had to arrest anybody, it would be her. Bryan and Gabby both said, please don't arrest anybody. They separated them from the night, and then about 2 weeks later, she's dead. Yeah. So, it's so hard.
So the lawsuit is,
yes,
check me on this because you've actually read the full, or I guess it's the notice. So what they've done is actually the notice of claim. If you're filing against, or if you intend to file or possibly will file against a government agency, you will have to file a notice of claim. So you have to give them, depending on the state, it's either 6 months, a year, sometimes it's even shorter time frame than that. You have to give them notice that you put them on notice that you're going to have a claim. So as I understand, thank you.
No, my pleasure.
We're drinking a lot of this one. This is a really good one.
It's easy to drink.
It does go down a little easily. But this is what we're reading is the notice of claim that they're saying. It's almost like an insurance demand of here we are filing a notice that we believe you've done X, Y, and Z wrong as a government entity. These are the damages that we've sustained, and we intend to file a lawsuit.
Yes.
So I think, I don't know if there's actually been a lawsuit filed or just this notice of claim.
My understanding, and I do want to take this moment to say I'd like to shout out Law and Crime. They were a website that provides a lot of information about this, but they actually provided the court documents. They made it really easy to find. So that's where I downloaded all the complaints and notices from. They're amazing. So many props to them. But on their website, when I was downloading sort of everything, it's my understanding that a complaint has been filed, but it's not accessible yet.
Okay, so only the notice is accessible, and that's what we're working with, but we don't have a full copy of the complaint that might actually have already been filed.
That's correct.
Okay, so that's our limitation of knowledge. So we're good. That's where we have, you can take it with a grain of salt or for whatever it's worth of the information that we have that we're using.
Yes. And so what they used, even before sort of a notice or a lawsuit was brought by the Petito family, was this the investigative report, because the case was so viral, that they went through all of the hours as like third party. And like I said, their conclusion was like, yeah, they messed up. Probably wasn't intentional. Now, so for a lawsuit, if that's like the overall conclusion, you're looking at it and saying, well, just because it was intentional doesn't mean you're not liable for something.
Right.
And what I found surprising was because Bryan Laundrie's estate had already been deemed liable for the wrongful death. I was like, well, how can they bring this like wrongful death suit again? But Virginia said they can. It's a different jurisdiction, and they're able to do that.
It is a totally different jurisdiction, right? It's not Florida. We are now in Utah. So we get into these double jeopardy issues, which is a criminal issue. Right. But a lot of people say, well, it's double jeopardy. Well, that doesn't apply. Because
and the parties are different, too.
Parties are different. Place is different. State is different. Everything is different. But they do have the ability to sue other parties for the wrongful death. Yes, Bryan Laundrie was found as he caused the death of Gabby Petito.
Right.
But this lawsuit explores the idea that he was not the only one. So what it seems to be alleging, based on the notice that was given, is that the Moab Police Department, with the actions they took and the actions they did not take, those were at least some direct and proximate cause of her death a few weeks later.
Yes. I mean, that sums it up beautifully. I think it's really hard for me because I did watch all the videos. I read this report. I think the law is a great thing, but I think it is an imperfect thing. And especially in the realm of family and especially domestic violence. Like, I don't think there's a way to make the law adequately address a lot of these things. I just don't. And I understand sort of the dynamic here at the scene is you have an officer who's sort of a more rookie officer. He's training. You have this older officer that stuff about his personal life has come out that is questionable.
That seems domestic related.
Yes. But the rookie, in my opinion, seems to be trying to like do things by the book, do the right thing. Well, by the book means an arrest needed to be made. And you're looking at these, not kids, but like a 22, 24-year-old who have gotten into this like argument. A witness saw it and was like, I think they were physical with each other, not really sure. And then they're like begging. Like, I get, on an emotional sort of human side, you're like, you don't want to like mess somebody's life up, right?
Right.
Because they had identified Gabby as the primary aggressor.
Of course, she doesn't want to be arrested.
Right, and she doesn't. And I think that there is, and it says in the notice that they negligently identified her as the primary aggressor.
Versus Bryan.
Which I would agree. Both of the witnesses who called the police identified him as the primary aggressor. She is shaking uncontrollably for the entire interaction, and he is like laughing. The fury I feel, like, I'm sorry, people like that, men like that, look.
It's hard. Again, we go back to the moral sense. The Me Too movement, we're hitting the domestic violence of, is this primarily against women? Right. And should it have been very clear to anyone that Gabby seems like she was being abused versus the other way around? Right. And we don't know. We ultimately don't know. We weren't there, and it was, they were having a difficult time deciding. Absolutely. So, and they consulted, and I think this is the part that I think makes the department more negligent. Like I said, I truthfully, based on what I've read, what I've seen, don't fault the officers for their choice. No, it was the wrong choice, but I understand sort of like from a human side, like how and why that was made. What I do not understand is when they called the supervisor, like their captain, is that the right? I don't know.
The person in charge of these officers. They call him to ask for sort of some guidance on how to handle this situation. And they are pretty much shut down and like offered no guidance. To me, that part seems pretty damning for like the negligent side of things.
Was he required to? And that's where we get for this lawsuit. We're going to hit duty breach and causation. Again, causation go back to look at the Law Unscripted for the first Tuesday of January, the 4th episode, because we explain the different elements that you have to prove of negligence. But for this one, let me tell you, first of all, there's duty and breach. We talked about that earlier here, where it's going to be hard for the Petito family to show that the Laundrie family had any duty to them, that they breached any duty. That's going to be, I think, the bigger issue than causation and damages. But in this case, yes, we still have duty. Did the police department have a duty to Gabby Petito and Bryan Laundrie? Yes, they have some in responding to a call. What is the extent of that duty? How far does it reach? What rules are they subject to? It seems, based on this report that was filed, that they didn't follow the rules that they had. And that's correct. From my understanding, too, is that it was even a recent change in sort of Utah legislation that was intended to take away discretion for these type of cases, and it does seem like it was thrown. Yeah, so it seems like they did violate this rule. But was that a breach for a tort case, for a civil case? And was that enough to show the causation to her death? That's the big one for this. And again, I love the legal maneuvering. It is very creative. It's extremely creative if they're saying this police department is at least partially responsible for her death. Of course, they didn't go and, beat her, strangle her, et cetera. That was another individual. So they're not saying that Moab is the only cause of her death. They're saying, yes, Bryan Laundrie had cause for her death, was the ultimate cause of her death. But the question is there another entity or another person, like including these police officers, negligence, Gabby would be alive. Right. But for their actions or their inactions, would she be alive? Yeah. And if this gets to a jury or a judge, that is a hard question. Oh, for sure. How do you say that their actions 2 weeks before her death did or didn't contribute? Would this have happened anyway? Yeah. Is his character, is Bryan's character, such that he would have done this, whether 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 4 months from that time, it would have happened anyway. Whereas the plaintiff's side is going to be saying, no, she would still be alive, except for this incident and the actions or inactions of the police officers. And that's what a judge or jury is going to have to decide. And what a question to have to decide. Oh, I do not envy a jury on that. That is a hard question, but it's a question of fact. It is. It is a question of fact for the jury. Not of law. It's not of law. A jury would have to decide, are these actions part of the cause? And a judge can't necessarily say yes or no. So, a judge or a jury would have to decide at a trial. So I think that a trial would be sustained, that it would be upheld. But goodness, what a risk.
And see, on the personal level, because, this is our happy hour, I will tell you, I do not think a win in Moab would be quite as satisfying as a win in Florida, because I detest the parents' actions that they took. Like, to me, it is just beyond like comprehension for me of to be that
over the
cold.
Death of a child. That
right.
I think that's where it's hitting this the cerebral issue.
Yes.
You're going to the amygdala or whatever the proper psychological terms are, is you're going back to that this is wrong moment where the little person inside of your head is going, this is wrong.
Yes.
But is it legally wrong? Can they be held accountable?
I don't think the law can handle this one, because
I don't know
what they did. And again, it just, to me, I guess maybe I offer sort of more in a professional context, like with an officer or police department, like sort of more room for error. But like Gabby was living with these people, like at the time, like that is such a like talk about just like a disregard for life, right? I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't have kids and they're like, I love my son so much, but I don't know. I don't know about that, my friend.
I don't know. So this is fascinating. So everybody, if you haven't caught up with the Gabby Petito case, it is currently happening. These cases are ongoing. We are on edge to see what happens next. Definitely on edge to see, will the attorney be allowed to be put into the lawsuit? What will the Moab Police Department do? Frankly, I think that it will probably settle out with the police department, maybe not with the mayor or other people who have been named, but my personal thoughts based on experience are they will probably settle out for something.
That makes sense.
But will a trial go forward? I don't know. And I am, as an attorney, I am legally fascinated, absolutely enthralled again with this case. So thank you very much for bringing it up and giving us some information.
Hey, like I said, I was sort of on my toes when it was happening in sort of the true crime aspect of it, but this has been equally complicated. So I hope we were able to explain, like I know a lot of people are familiar with the case, so I hope we're able to sort of explain in a fun way with, with the subject material, sort of what's happening in the law with it right now. While we, I talk about how much my strong opinions about the law and about the Laundrie family.
Chelsea's opinionated self gives those opinions. But that's what makes it interesting and makes it fun and hopefully interesting for you.
That's the thing. I understand, like, we're going to be, you are an attorney. I will be an attorney eventually, but I'm still a person, right? Like, I have opinions.
Absolutely. And those opinions are okay. It's happy hour. This is an acceptable place. And you all have opinions too. This is a hot case.
Yes. So questions, let us know what you think. Like, comment, subscribe.
Please.
Like I said, if there was anything you sort of want to know more about that we spoke about,
put it in.
Another case that you have questions about, or I'm just going to keep coming up with them and you guys are like at the mercy of my whims.
They're not whims, they're current cases.
That's true.
But yes, if there's something that you think is current, what we're trying to do is actually each week hit what we think are legally the most significant.
Yes.
And we're going to default a little bit to the civil law because I don't think a lot of that is spoken about. There's a lot of commentary on criminal cases, a lot of people talking about people who have been arrested, trials for the criminal cases, but I did the criminal cases. They're interesting, but I love talking about the civil because I don't think a lot of people understand them as well as they do the criminal ones. So we're going to hit the hot legal topics, but I love the civil slant on it. Yeah. Let us know. We're going to see what comes up next week so that we can talk about that. And it might be more than one case. We might hit a couple.
I have a few that I've seen that, are supposed to get updates in the next week. So we might have to hit them.
We're waiting. So thank you for joining us for the Legal Weekly Wine brought to you by Tehrani Law LLC and the Law Unscripted. Again, I'm Virginia Tehrani.
I'm Chelsey Rogers.
And check us out next week every Friday for Happy Hour and check out our other podcasts and our other information. You can find us also on www.tehranilawllc.com. Just opened the business officially at the new year. So that was the big announcement. I know, God, we waited till the very end. The big announcement we told you in the last episode, that is what we wanted to tell you is officially the law office has opened for business. I am on my own. Chelsey's helping out with the legal assistant position and with the podcast. So follow us, like us, rate us, comment on us. We love the interaction. We love that you're interested. Hopefully other people will find us if you find interest in us and like and share.
Absolutely.
But that is what we had to say about today and Gabby Petito.
Yes, so it was great to be here with you guys. Like I said, like, comment, subscribe, wine recommendations, questions you have for us. If not, if you need an attorney and you're in the Maryland, D.C., Virginia area,
check us out.
Hello.
Yeah, check us out. We're accident injury attorneys. I'm an accident injury attorney. You're a law student. Into existence. We're speaking that into being. But yeah, we're happy to help. If you want to check us out, do that because you never need a lawyer
till you do.